Welcome to Alger Podcast, episode 31. If you'd like to get more information about Alger Consulting, you can go to my website, which is algercoaching.com. That's ALGER, algercoaching.com. And one quick announcement before we get into this. I do have an upcoming newsletter and a free course on reading people. We'll have more on that soon, but you can go to my website to get updates or sign up for the newsletter. So today I got with me a good friend of mine, Jake, with Greenlight Studios. Welcome to the podcast, Jake.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here.
After helping you edit the podcast, it's a weird experience to actually be featured on one. So
be on that side of it, huh?
Yeah, I don't like it.
No?
No.
What do you not like about it?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we'll just get going.
It is a little strange to me to do a podcast this way, just because usually it's a virtual call, but it's feels more friendly because this feels, or I don't know if friendly is the right word, but it feels more meeting like rather than a podcast, just because we're so used to doing virtual meetings like this. But Jake, you had a really interesting upbringing, and you're in Thailand now, doing marketing in Thailand, and you got a lot of cool stuff happening. I don't want to give it all away, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, any particular things from the childhood? I don't want to bore people, with the whole 9 yards, but
Well, you're the oldest of 10 kids. Let's start there.
Okay, sure. My parents were beach bum hippies from Santa Cruz, California, back in the 70s, early 80s, and they they did an about face, let's say. They became Christians during the Billy Graham years, and got married and decided, let's move up into the mountains, not far from you, Bryan, actually, Placerville, California, Amador counties. Have our acreage, have our farm, have a bunch of kids, and homeschool, all that good stuff. So, I'm the oldest of 10. My mom was a nurse, worked as a nurse, and then she had me, and she just was like, she loved it. So
they went from the hippie scene in Santa Cruz. I assume a lot of pot smoking and whatnot in the past to making a
I don't know.
Yes. You don't know the story. Okay.
No, they've actually been quite transparent. And so they didn't have a lot of maybe, they were kind of allowed to do whatever. And there was a lot of freedom to just hang out with maybe not ideal crowds and get into situations that later that they didn't look back with fondness on. Yeah. And so, I think a lot of these homeschooling, big families, things like that, people assume that that the parents were, very religious from the beginning, and that's where it all came from. But for my parents, it came out of let's be together as a family, let's enjoy life together, let's worship together, and let's give our kids an environment where their parents are present and involved, and
you definitely get a lot more time with your kids and your family when you homeschool. Not everybody has the ability to do that, but it's a really neat thing when you can, as far as the family dynamic. So, but with all 10 kids, all 10 kids were homeschooled. Is that right?
In various forms over the years. Yeah. My youngest brother is 20 years younger than me. So he's actually graduating high school next year. And then they're now in Idaho. But yeah, in one form or another, quite a few of us, some kind of hybrid, like school program or private school program, but that were just done at home, or we went to a private school for high school, but we're homeschooled up to high school.
Homeschool or private school. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Now, you're in Thailand right now. You were in Northern California, but in between, you've been to a lot of different countries, right? I mean, you've seen the world, quite a bit of the world.
Yeah, I'm a fairly, let's say, practical person. When people in high school or something is like, oh, I'm gonna go, see the world or go to Italy or I want to do this or that. I was just kind of like rolled my eyes and go get a job and then do it. When you,
Yeah.
I I wasn't very well traveled. Besides, a few times to Mexico and Washington State, I would say, like maybe, and Arizona. That was about it.
But not at all for a long time.
Correct. Yeah. I was very familiar with I-5.
Yeah, not much out there.
And, but I mean, in a quick nutshell, um, got, how to break this down. I started chatting with a girl in 2005 after graduating high school who was a missionary kid out here in Thailand. Her parents, her dad was actually born in Burma, went through, as a teenager, the military communist coup takeover in Burma back in the 60s, had some crazy stories. And anyway, they had relocated their ministry at a Bible college to Thailand, and started chatting with her, and over a period of time became romantically interested, and we got married, visited Thailand to meet the fam and see where she grew up. We got married in Washington State in 2008. But then, I was working at a small retail outdoor store, had 4 stores there in the Olympic Peninsula area. And that was 2008, 2009, during the recession, right? So they went out of business. Suddenly, I had done some college, but then kind of dropped out because I was kind of learning on the job, marketing and media and things like that.
How much college you go to?
About 6 months, yeah, or
6
one
months.
semester.
That's 6 months more than I did.
You know what?
never
It was 2 semesters. I did 1 semester in person, and then they actually offered online, so I did the next semester online. And then after that, I was just like, I can learn this.
I mean, today you own and operate a business, and we live in a culture and in a society that really places a high value on college, and so much so that the prices of college have just gone insane through the roof. Now, I didn't go to college, and it was, I mean, partly because of finances. I didn't grow up in an affluent, environment.
Likewise.
But the biggest thing for me, I couldn't have done it. If I had the money to go, if or if I financed it, I couldn't sit in a classroom. I was a poor student. I love learning, but the structure of school was never for me. I never enjoyed. I say I was a poor student. I wasn't a poor student, but I didn't excel until I learned how I learn. And when I figured that out, and the way that I learned best personally is just find something I'm interested in and exhaust it until I'm not interested anymore. Or, some things just go on and on and on, but I couldn't follow like a curriculum. And so, most of the time it was really slow and I was bored. But to sit in a classroom and just listen to a teacher lecture for, 30 minutes and then get out of that and go to another one, do shit, like I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So college isn't for everybody. I mean, and you don't, there's so many avenues that you can go down. And I don't want to say that college is a waste of that. It's not the case, but there is.
It's a way, yeah.
Yeah, it's a way. But there are so many other avenues that people can go down and just get right to work and be 4 years ahead of people in college, And it sounds like that was kind of your experience too. Is that right?
Yeah. So, I mean, even touching back to the homeschool thing, we didn't, have a lot of demands on our schedule. My mom had a schedule, but at the same time, we had a lot of free time. If we got done with our school and did it well and were diligent, did our chores. You know, we had a farm, lots of animals and things like that. So a lot of chores, and then we had free time to do what we wanted. But we didn't have Game Boys sitting around and Nintendos and things like that. So we had my mom had a pretty big library of books. My dad allowed me to turn half of his tool shed into my own science museum. So
you weren't allowed to have video games, or you just didn't have them?
There was just not a need, like that was my parents. They're just kind of like, yeah, I know all your friends have these things, but you don't need that. Like, yeah, you don't need that.
I tell you what, I had my first job when I was 12 years old, payroll job. I mean,
Wow.
it was on the books, but technically illegal. But it was,
Sure.
time ago where people could do that. And they wrote me a check out from the company, but I only got paid once a month. And when you're 12, getting paid once a month, that's a long time. That's a long wait. But my very first paycheck, I took and I went down to the store and I bought a video game setup, an old Atari.
Wow, dang. Yeah.
And man, did I play that thing a lot.
My parents were kind of just like, it's a waste of time, so we're not going to introduce it,
Yeah.
right? Like, if you want to do that when you grow up and get out of the house, fine. But, you know, um, and actually, they started letting us when I was about 16. And then because of a problem with my obsession with what they were allowing us to play, my dad was like, okay, your third strikes, you're out. Never again in our house. And literally, I mean, the video games were all gone for the rest of my career in that house. Yeah.
Just that quick, yeah.
That quick. I mean, I had to get them there. It was my fault. But what it did with homeschooling and things like that, it causes you to enjoy learning yourself and get interested in things of value, right? So, when video games were taken away, I was into classical music, science, super nerd, and reading Tom Clancy novels, right? Hunt for Red October. So I was sitting there.
You're like what, grade school or high school, and you're
I'm like
all
16,
that? Okay.
and I got a turntable from a yard sale, right, with all these records, and it came with just all these classical music records. So I got Tchaikovsky playing there, and I'm reading Tom Clancy, and then I got all my science stuff out, and I was a pretty B plus A minus student. I'd read it once, didn't have to study, do well on the test. I was just like, school and then college for me was like, I have so many things I'm interested in, or I want to do, or I want to learn, or I want to develop, and so let's get the school stuff out of the way so I can go do this. And instead of it being a video game, it was stuff I was interested in, but that was also like beneficial, right? So it soon morphed into creating media and various creative endeavors, right? Like I was learning Photoshop on my own, learn After Effects on my own. You learn 3D modeling.
You're learning at school, and then in your free time, you just continued learning as a kid. Yeah, that's pretty wild. I remember reading the book Tipping Point and talked about why certain people learn faster and learn more. And one of the weird things that they talked about, that Malcolm Gladwell talked about, was summers and how people spent their time in the summer. So when you test kids at the end of one school year and then at the beginning of the next school year, in certain, families or upbringings, whatever, the test scores dropped significantly because the kids weren't learning, but others, they went up because the families were spending more time together. They were learning together and continuing the lessons. And so it doesn't seem, well, in one summer, it's just not going to make that much difference, right? But by the time it's 12 or 13 summers, it's pretty significant, which is kind of if you haven't read the book, it's kind of the premise of, when something tips. And so you're spending in, most days, you had a bunch of siblings as one that's 20 years younger than you probably didn't have a whole lot of interactions with growing
Right.
up, but you're learning in the afternoons, after school, during school. I mean, by the time you got out of school, you probably were well advanced in knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I tested really well in the SATs, and I was a bit of a nerd, so there was a little bit of acclamation to, right, the Britney Spears obsessed peers of my day. You know, but oh well.
But
But
see,
also,
testing. I mean, what? I mean, it's not no value, but when we're talking about running a business,
right,
right? I mean, when you're talking about running a business, does it really matter that much? I mean, there's book knowledge, and then there's like what you actually use. And I know for me, I went to a wonderful small town. I grew up in a small town, but what I learned after about eighth grade was not significant leaps that gave me, these great benefits to what I learned in school after about eighth grade. What I learned,
right.
started to read self-help books and things like that was, I've said this before, with about 25 years old, I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I didn't know stuff like that existed before then. And then I caught on fire with learning and growing. But school was not a good majority of school just didn't seem like practical knowledge to me as much. And I'm not an advocate for, dropping out of school, or that's not what I'm
Sure.
saying. It's just when you mix it in with your own growth for your own direction based on your own, how you're wired. I mean, that's a good combination.
Well, like, I mean, this is catching ahead in the story a little bit, but like in Poland, or even here, the emphasis of the amount of homework and the amount of time kids spend learning, or in class or working on homework is insane. They're not kids. They don't have time to be a kid, because of the pressure there. Like, you got to make good grades so that you get a good job. So, um, and my wife and I were just having a discussion, I think yesterday. Our kids homeschool, they have an online curriculum and all that stuff. But, we just, there was a baby born in the family, a niece, just a few days ago, which you're aware of. And we were just like, oh, we're going to be living nearby to our brother-in-law, and, they're going to need help with the kid. We have some kids that are teenagers now. So, for a couple months, let's have them, 1 or 2 days a week go help with the kid. That is learning to support your other family members, helping take care of, kids, and learning to be a, kind of a support system and things like that. I don't care if they miss out on learning some algebraic formula for doing this or that, whatever. I think for school it teaches you to learn. It gives you a foundation for how the world works. It also teaches you, like structure and, time organization and things like that, but not at the expense of all the other stuff you need to learn, like good financial, how to take care of your finances, how to do your taxes, what is health insurance, how to.
And they sure don't teach you how to run a business.
No. So we are often having conversations where giving kids context about things in the business or considerations here or there. And yeah, I think in balance is good. In plenty of places where we've lived, we've seen that quite out of balance, and kids just like slaves to the school system because you got to do that to be able to get a good job. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was thinking about my daughter. Both my kids did 4-H, and my daughter did a lot more than my son. But I remember when she was little, she had to keep a ledger for all the money she was spending, and I told her she had to pay me back because when we started off with her first, large animal, she had a steer. I told her she had to sell the steer and pay me back, and we were buying feed, and we were probably $500 or something like that into feed.
Right.
and she's keeping this ledger. And I remember watching her, and she's 10 years old. And she's sweating, wiping sweat off of her forehead. And she goes, "Well, Dad, what am I going to do if this cow dies?" And or steer dies. And I said, welcome to the world of business. I mean, it's risk. You're taking a risk. And what a great lesson. What a great life lesson to learn to go through start getting comfortable with stress, with that type of risk. So many people spend their lives avoiding risk and then in going for security as opposed to risk, but miss out on so much, because of that fear. And I just think, think back on that. And I just, that's a great lesson, really great lesson. And you don't learn that type of stuff in school.
For sure. And regarding, I'd say back to college. So yeah, that's why I didn't stay in college. Yeah. I was learning on the job, but then, the job disappeared because of the recession. Living in the Pacific Northwest, there wasn't a lot of stuff going on for young people that, besides like taking care of older Californians that had moved there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was working at Walmart 20 hours a week and filming wedding videos on the side and doing my own stuff on the side. I filmed some stuff for A&E, actually, for a Bob Saget show.
Really?
Yeah, for a few days, they had me do some small pre-production project for them. And I was doing roofing on the side. I was landscaping on the side, did some landscaping projects, because my first job in California was landscaping at 16, on my first payroll job. And then one day I'm sitting in the Walmart parking lot because a friend or my wife's uncle had said, "Hey, don't you do video and stuff? My company makes portable sawmills out in Indiana, and our marketing department is looking for someone. You should, apply." And so I was literally out in the Walmart parking lot on my lunch break for the first interview, and then had a couple more interviews. And what was interesting about Wood-Mizer, who, of course, Jennifer has been the California dealer for many, many years.
My wife, you're
Correct, yeah. Which is how we initially got connected years ago. Again, no college credentials for the role. And the role I actually ended up getting wasn't in videos and public relations. So writing press releases and case studies and handling their magazine that they sent to like 50,000 customers at the time. And they hired me with me not really having any credentials on paper.
Wow.
But I think a medium-sized manufacturer in the sawmill space was like, here's a guy who, is passionate and doesn't mind getting his hands dirty, right? And likes to learn.
Yeah, you like to learn and you're not afraid to work.
Right. So crazily enough, I got that job, and my first ever day on the job was with Jennifer, your wife, at the Oregon Logging Conference, just watching sawmills run and things like that. Moved to Indiana for that job. I bought my buddy's F-150 extended cab and built a big plywood box on the back and moved all our stuff that way. We had two kids at the time.
California to Indiana, huh?
California and Indiana, broke down 3 times on the way there, drove straight through with a buddy, didn't stop.
Didn't stop except for the breakdowns?
Except for the breakdowns. Those were our breaks, yeah. And my wife and the kids flew a few days later. I'm not much of a risk taker, actually. She had family there. It was a good job. And I was desperate, like Walmart at 20 hours a week will make you do about just anything.
Yeah. But you said you're not much of a risk taker, but you own your own business now. So how do you get from not much of a risk taker to the leap of starting your own business?
Well, Yeah, it's all about risk avoidance, actually, the entire story, I think. And not worked in Indiana for 2 years, and then one day the CEO from Scotland's like, hey, about our, other manufacturing facilities and offices that handle Europe, Africa, and Asia over in Poland. It's like, oh yeah, yeah, the ones that do the funny ads that, don't translate at all to American sensibilities. Yeah, those people. Yeah, would you like to move there?
So you got offered a job in Poland?
Correct. Yeah, just totally off on the, like I had no idea it was coming. Um, and what they wanted was someone to kind of like go over and help kind of bring the two, start bridging the two. They worked very separately. So I don't know why they came up with me specifically, but they just say, hey, yeah, we'll move your family over there. You help kind of like internationalize some of the marketing that they're doing, being an English speaker in the office. They had about, 600 employees over there, and I'd be the only native speaker because it was out in a little rural town, beautiful area. But my wife had grown up overseas, so when I called her, like literally dumbstruck, because we were about to buy a house in Indiana and all this stuff. I was just become a deacon in our church there. And I'm calling her, and she's making Christmas cookies with her friend from church. It was right before Christmas. And I was like, oh, I was working a second job at the time as well because we just couldn't get ahead. So, we're renting super cheap. We just had a third kid show up, and, we could just not save money. Like, there was nothing we could do about it, right? So for 6 months, I worked in the deli at Kroger, um, grocery food store there in the Midwest, so that we could earn $3,000 to have in our Dave Ramsey, rainy day 6-month emergency fund. And so I talked with my wife, and she's just like, okay, I mean, Poland sounds, what, do we know anything about Poland? I was like, yeah, it looks, I
But
mean,
she was used to being overseas, so that wasn't a huge stretch for her to take that risk. Just a different area.
correct. Yeah. Um, so she was actually a lot more chill about it than I was. But that evening I just knew that, okay, something's changing. We got our $3,000 saved up that I've been working like 15 hours a day some days. I gave my 2 weeks notice that night. I was like, I don't know if I'm moving to Poland or not, but I am definitely not working till, 10, 11 at night at Kroger anymore.
Calling it, huh?
Yeah. Had a really interesting experience though. One very interesting experience. One night leaving at like 10:30 at night after washing dishes for 2.5 hours, taking out all the trash. I could see I'm crossing to my car, and a guy is about to cross paths with me to take his cart back to the cart area, you know. And I'm in my Kroger shirt, got my name tag on. So I say, oh, I could grab that for you, sir, because he's coming out of his way, I could see, to take it back from his cart. And so I just grab the cart, and send it off to the little area and then continue on to my car. And suddenly he runs up behind me, which of course is like 10:30 at night in Indiana. I'm like, look. And he's like, you know what? I'm one of the general managers at one of the competitor stores down the street. Can you come in for an interview?
Wow.
I went and I chatted with him. There was nothing more really. I mean, it was just going to be more store work. I wasn't interested in that, but it was one of those. I was feeling like, man, you work so hard to get ahead. Your wife's at home with kids, and it just it felt good to go, wow, okay. There's things that I'm doing that people value, that people uh, that are right, that are maybe above what my job maybe entails. Or sorry, side story.
That's right. That's it. I mean, as you were talking about that, I started thinking about the value of recognizing that you're your own brand always. No, no matter what you're doing, on the job, off the job, wherever. And if you treat your life that way and hold yourself accountable to a high level, then opportunities do come your way. And I mean, that didn't turn out into this great opportunity, but it sounds like he gave you a great deal of confidence.
It did, and it was an encouragement to see that, okay, I may not enjoy the job that I'm currently working, but I know why I'm doing it. And I mean, working at Walmart 20 hours a week, when you're a young guy who feels like he has a lot to offer the world, and you have like no money in your bank account, and your Valentine's gift to your wife was one large French fry from Jack in the Box,
But it was large though, so
it
that
was a large, yeah. And yeah, it can be tough, and but it can also be a great experience of like, you know what? Don't think too highly of yourself. Why do you think you deserve more than people growing up in, South Sudan, or, Eastern Ukraine right now, or Myanmar, which most people don't know about the issues there. Are you better than those people? It's lucky that you were born in the US of A, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so stop having a pity party, put the time in, put the work in, and no one, owes you anything just because of what you think you deserve. So it was a good practice, and I had to actually pray many, many times. Like maybe God actually, I mean, maybe God wants me to work at Walmart the rest of my life. There's people here who need encouragement. There's people here that I could be positive influence on. If I got to heaven and he said, you know what, I really had amazing things for you to do in people's lives if you had just been okay with working at Walmart. But you weren't okay. You became a bitter old man because that was what I wanted you to do. I was like, you know what? So that was a really, if it had just been success after success, or like great opportunity after great opportunity, you're not having to mentally go there and check your motivations and your ego. Um, so I really feel like, flipping hamburgers, having a gap year before going off to college and working some menial jobs and things like that is a tremendous experience that hopefully teaches you some humility and some value for those things, right? But it doesn't happen overnight either. Like it was me like going, well, I can be pissed off at this, or I can make the most of it. And that's going to have to be a daily thing when people are coming up to you and going, hey, can I get some fried potato fritters on my food stamps? And they got this big cart piled high. And you're like, why, I don't even qualify for food stamps, and I can't afford that. And I'm the one, like those
Yeah,
kinds of,
it's easy to focus on what's wrong with things and lose track when you're on a path, because sometimes it feels like it may never come. But I think that's why being content wherever you are, but while you're chasing your dreams and planting the seeds and and going after it, but also a level of contentment that you know and finding the joy in wherever you're at, because happiness isn't with the next job. It's not with the next opportunity. It's not going to come if you become a millionaire. It's only going to come if you work on that now, wherever you are, and those are great. I think those are great lessons, and I think they help with gratitude. I mean, I was probably the poorest I ever was. And I worked the hardest and the most hours ever in my life. Felt like, it was several years that I did that. And it felt like I was never, ever going to get ahead at times. When I look back on that stuff now, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the lessons that I learned from it, because it taught me persistence. It taught me hope and, and just having faith, faith that whatever happens, I'll find some kind of joy and pleasure in life. And the journey can sometimes really be great when I think if you just take a minute and absorb it, as you're going.
Yeah, like the worst job I ever had was at Service Master, which is fire and water damage restoration and carpet cleaning and such. And it wasn't because of the work. I'd be in someone's basement at 2 a.m, that's half full of water, flooded, right? In a
Wow.
hazmat suit, and stuffing wet insulation from the floor joists into garbage bags and handing them up the crawl space, like to the other guys who did not volunteer to do that, right? They're like, well, I got to go check this over here. I'm like, all right, well, okay, fine. I'll go down there and do it. Um, that was, that wasn't the aspect that I didn't enjoy, the worst thing about it. It was management. Um, it was a bunch of people from a church and a family owned situation where, they basically just dumped stuff on us, didn't train us. And all of them were highly trained in what we were doing out in the field, but they had already done it. And there was no way they were going to go back out in the field. It's like 8 people in the office, 3 people doing all the work out. And just seeing that level of mismanagement, apathy as far as their team, that was so difficult to swallow. And I don't want to go into that further, but also that work. And I was able to go, you know what? I don't like this work, but this is still work that brings value to people. This is still a job that is, it's technically a good job. If the management had been good, you could deal with the late night calls and stuff like that. But anyway, moved to Poland, which is a lovely country. You should definitely visit. It's Eastern Europe, Central Eastern Europe is more affordable than Western Europe. It's less touristy. People aren't as accustomed to seeing tourists generally, compared to like the Parises and Romes and Londons and stuff. Relocated our family over there. It was intended to be 2 years. It ended up being 6.
Oh, wow. So you're there a while.
Yeah, so our kids ended up going to school there, learning Polish. They're running around like little Poles. And we loved our time there. We have dear friends that we made there, and the company as well gave me a lot of opportunities to grow. So it's kind of start in a position just doing kind of international PR and managing their international accounts and dealers for that. And then eventually the last couple of years was managing their digital marketing side completely, and being in my first leadership role with a team about 5 or 6, and traveling to 30 plus countries as well, right? Like,
Oh, wow.
visiting.
Now, did you find different? I mean, you're in your first leadership role. Did you find differences in leadership from one country to another?
Well, yeah, I took it incredibly seriously and cautiously because there were a couple interesting dynamics. I was co-leading the team with the lady that had led it for like 15 years. She had been the leader, and then they made me the co-leader.
Oh,
And we were supposed to work together. And there was no hierarchy, like, like, and I was super nervous about that. But fortunately, because of her, and then also how I had worked in the years leading up to that. When she got the news, she was like, "Oh, thank goodness I have you at my side,
oh,
and we're going to be a dynamic." And we had no issues for 2 years, like 0, in
very
a
cool.
very like deferential and collaborative and supportive. So that was the first thing I was super nervous about. The other thing was the stereotypes about Americans.
Are they true?
Yes and
I mean,
no.
is it true with there's heavy stereotypes?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And there's, I would go to these very remote, very poor places, sawmills like in India or something like that, or far off Indonesia. And the white guy shows up and he's from corporate, and everybody has expectations that come along with that, right? And then I show up, I'm 10 years younger, I'm super young looking, and I'm crawling around underneath the sawmills with a camera, getting dirty and stuff like that. And everybody's scratching their heads like, that's never happened before. So there are, kind of expectations and stuff. And an interesting story about that was when I, became a supervisor, I was having our video guy go have a meeting about a simple video project that needed to be done with several stakeholders in the company. And he's like, can you please come to the meeting with me? I was like, why? Like, why do you need me here? And he's like, because I need you there so that the other stakeholders in the company who outranked him in other departments would take our needs seriously. He says, I'm a local, and Jake, they just treat you different.
Wow.
The meeting ends up being in English. They just treat you different because you're the guy they brought over from America. We talked a lot about that. I was really upset by that. I was like, no, we can't. He's like, dude, it is. It's the way it is. So I was like, I'm sorry about that. He's like, dude, why are you apologizing? Let's use it.
Uh,
So kind of like understanding that some of those kind of expectations or stereotypes exist, learning how to kind of use those occasionally to your advantage, but not with your team. Being very, very inclusive to your team. When you're dealing with people who don't speak your native language, giving them a lot of grace and we don't like to have dead spaces. Americans don't like to have dead spaces in the conversation. This conversation is probably a great example of that. For example, in Eastern Central Europe, a dead space in a meeting for 5-10 seconds is okay. People are thinking. No one's awkward. No one's like, oh, someone has to say something. So literally just giving a very uncomfortably long time for, them to put their thoughts together, put it into English, make sure they don't look like an idiot with using the wrong English vocabulary words because they're very conscious of how they look in front of someone else. So little things like that of just like, and then seeing the fruits of that, seeing how much people enjoyed working together. We had a great environment. After I left the company, then, the people I supervised all have given me great feedback over the years about their experience while working in that role. So definitely a lot I literally was watching The Office at that time and going, okay, if Michael Scott does that, do the opposite.
That's your great trainer, huh?
He was. And then I got a great book that was called Your First Leadership Role, which actually was brilliant. I found it at a bookshop in Warsaw, believe it or not.
Huh.
Anyway, that was a very interesting experience, very rewarding. And then came out here to Thailand, long story short, and started freelancing myself because my wife had the opportunity to apply for Thai citizenship. We moved here right before COVID. And then as I started freelancing bit by bit, took about 3 years to really kind of get some traction and then start hiring my own team, set up my own business officially out here and things like that.
So from the time you decided to start your own business, it was 3 years before you felt like you were getting decent traction?
Yeah, it took that long to kind of start at like, 10, well, in some cases, $5 to $15 an hour, $20 an hour in one case. when you're starting everything anew in a different location where people don't know you, and you know, I've learned that people don't hire you when you're ready for them to take the job. They hire you when they suddenly see the large pest in their house that they
Yeah.
have to get rid of now. They don't hire
Yeah.
you when they see, I don't know, some roly polies.
Yeah.
And the same was with me.
A
They,
weird thing happens when you open your business. You often have a mindset that once you're open, people are going to come to you, but it doesn't work that way. It's a lot slower than most people think.
yeah, even your wife is a great example. Like, for a couple of years, she's aware officially that, I'm freelancing. But I think there were some specific pain points, and the fact that I was coming to California, visiting family, and letting people know I'd be available for a meeting, and then it clicks, right? And she's like, you know what? I should have Jake come by and see if there's some stuff he could help me out with. He could meet the team, we could discuss. But I could have helped her for the 2 years before that, but you have to longevity, right? You have to kind of be there and be ready when they're ready. And so it
Yeah,
takes a while.
I heard it saying that the seventh time somebody hears something is the first time they heard it. And I mean, and that it's so true. I thought of that often, especially when I was managing large groups of people, because human nature, you want to tell somebody something once and they get it and they move forward and everything's good. Well, it doesn't work that way, especially when it comes to change, because sometimes they're not thrilled with change. People forget, and it's not like, when you got your business that you're starting, it's your life. It's everything to you.
Right.
It's almost all of your waking thoughts and, especially when you're first getting going. So it comes as a little bit of a shock that some of the people, maybe heard about it and forgot, or, whatever, but
What do you do again? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, tell me what you do again. But the seventh time that they hear it is the first time. And I think we forget that. But, when you're starting out, it's all about sales. It's all about, getting seen and known and staying in front of people, to not just so that they know what you do, but also to remind them that you're there, because they may be thinking when they heard it the first time, they didn't need it. They didn't need a marketer 2 years previously, but 6 months later, all of a sudden they need a marketer. Well, they're not thinking about you in that moment. And that's why I think it's so important. I think marketing is so important, marketing yourself well, which is obviously what you do. You got to stay out in front of people, whether you're paying a marketer or whether you're doing it yourself. I mean, you got to find an avenue and stay consistent. There's a reason I call it the beer commercial, when I'm training leaders, because it's something that resonates. And what I mean by that is, like Budweiser or whoever, they didn't make the beer that they, do whatever research, do whatever experiments to create the beer that they want, and then advertise once and get what they have. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Nobody does that. Well, very few people do that. There are some cases out there where people don't advertise at all, and word of mouth is really strong, but it's so incredibly rare. But back to like what, beer companies do. I mean, they are constantly in your face. They're constantly advertising. Everywhere you go, you're going to see advertising. And they do that for a reason, because the seventh time somebody heard something is the first time. And they're hoping that even if you don't drink today, if you start drinking in 6 months, that you think about it, you remember that. But it's hard when you're starting out to kind of rationalize that. You think like, well, wouldn't these people remember that? And the truth of the matter is they wouldn't, because it's not as valuable to them
As it
in
is
the
to
moment
you.
that they heard about it. Yeah, and it can't be. It can't be. I mean, I know it sounds kind of harsh, but it can't be. Like, what we do is incredibly important to us. It's incredibly valuable, but it's only valuable to other people in the moments that it's valuable.
That's why, for example, like, in marketing, whether marketing, working with you or others, I enjoy not like marketing for beer and, like phones and stuff like that, technology is not as enjoyable for me. It's kind of more like, boots on the ground, grassroots type stuff, more industrial, commercial companies. And one thing I used to tell our team is we'd be obsessing about some write-up or something, or some case study or press release. And everybody in the, and like the sales manager has an opinion, he wants this change and they want this change. And, oh, we missed a period here or something. And I'd go, okay, look, we got to do this right. No one's going to read this, guys. Like, no one's going to actually read this. We're going to read it more than anybody or any of our customers will. And they'd be kind of like, aren't you supposed to be the supervisor telling us how important this is? And, and I'd say, okay, 5 people will read this, right? We'll send it to 1,000. 5 people will actually read it, if that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the fact that it exists is more the important thing. The fact that there's a headline, the fact that there is something that they see. So, for example, they page through the magazine, they flip through, the sales manager gives them this, oh, here's our customer magazine. They flip through it. They're not going to read it, but mentally, that shows the person that there's something of value here.
Right.
The fact that all those case studies exist in that magazine, what we're doing needs to be done right, needs to have thought put into it, can't just be thrown into AI and then printed. But we also need to not overemphasize some of the things that we do in marketing and we need to know where it actually fits in the sales cycle and have a very realistic view of that. And I think what you're mentioning is also having a realistic view of your own company and how people perceive you, and how they think about you. They think about when they need something, right? For pest control, hopefully people aren't thinking about the pest control business that you had, that you ran all the time, every day. Like, oh, pest control. Oh, that's a nice concept.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. Nobody ever thinks about it. When they think about it, they want you there now. I mean, because they got the bugs, and you just don't ever think about it. I never thought about it as a career until I had a friend that was in the industry. And even then I didn't think too much of it, until I found out how much money he made and I was broke. And I was like, hey, are they hiring? So I turned into a hypocrite really, really fast. But Jake, you've been on a really interesting journey, from homeschooled with 10, siblings, or 10 of you all together, 9 siblings, I guess. And Poland to Thailand, taking a lot of risks, a lot of jumps, a lot of, what advice would you have for somebody starting out right now that's just sitting there, maybe they're 25 or they're 30 years old or whatever, and they've never owned their own business, but they're thinking about doing it, or thinking about doing this big move for a career or something like that. Often we talk ourselves out of those things for fear and things like that. Like, what advice would you have for them in dealing with that and overcoming that?
Well, it's interesting because we were actually just, discussing with someone who's towards the beginning of their career the other day, thinking about making a big change, a change that they don't feel right about a lot of the aspects, but it's related to a relationship. And obviously kind of giving, support and help, but also some cautions there, right? Like, if you don't feel right about the direction that this would take you in all these different ways, maybe that's not the kind of risk that you want to take just for a relationship to make it work.
Do you ever feel 100% right about it?
No, absolutely not, for sure.
So how much right do you have to feel before you move to Poland or move across country or move to Thailand?
Fortunately, I think me and my wife were very, we've always approached things together. So when we went and scouted out Poland, she went with, right? And the company paid for it. And when we came to Thailand, it was an area of mine that I was interested in. I was like, you know what? I would like to live in Asia as opposed to move back to the States right away. But it was, that's kind of the core thing is you got to be on the same page, and there's a lot of things that you won't be on the same page with risk wise, right?
Sure.
So there's risks that I've been interested in taking that my wife has been, a cautionary voice towards. As I give it more time, I go, you know what? Yeah, she's right. Or maybe I could be right, but I married this girl for a reason, right? So we gotta, kind of balance that out. Too much risk, not enough. I do think that there's something to be said about like you only have one life. So, you would regret not having tried something. Um, I definitely think getting good advice, getting good counselors. So every time we made some of these moves, first person I called was my dad, who literally is one of the least traveled people in the world. He worked construction all his life, heavy machinery, and then renting jobs on the West Coast, right? But I call him, and there's a couple other people that I always touch base with, and I get their insights and their cautions, and make sure that those are lining up with my own, and making sure that my interest in doing this isn't from an ego standpoint. Wow, I can't wait to put on Facebook that I'm moving to Europe. Uh,
It is kind of cool though, isn't it?
it is a very cool experience, but then when you're actually in it, you're more distracted by all the.
I meant putting that post on Facebook, but I was just kidding.
No, for sure. I mean, it is. And I've been blessed not having really sought after a lot of these opportunities that have been very interesting. You have to also gauge like how much of this is showboating, right? Most of your other friends didn't get an offer for the company to send them to another place, and then, get to explore beautiful places in Europe and things like that. Or most of the, sorry, my kids are asking if they can turn on the air conditioner because it is Thailand, even though it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Yes, you may turn it on. But yeah, I mean, living here in Thailand and owning our own company and it growing, I mean, when you say that, everybody's just like immediately like, wow, oh, I wish I could do that. But it's, you still have all the leadership areas that you need to grow in, all the issues of any business, all the issues of like, just because you're in Thailand running a business doesn't mean you're out on the beach every day. If anything, it's harder because you're like, the beach is right there. I want to take my kids to explore the natural wonders. And I'm sitting here 10, 11 hours a day, 6 days a week,
Yeah.
So even in Poland, I'd have people come up to me and go, why would you ever move to Poland? Doesn't our country suck? All this stuff from the locals, isn't America like, and I would just say, look, I believe America has a lot of opportunity for people who work hard and things. Yes. But it's also hard, right? And try to give people a little bit better of a feeling of, kind of the reality of it, and help them to see, being content in their own way as much as possible with their life situation is better than continuously looking at Hollywood and grass is greener.
Yeah, it's easy from the, outside of America to judge the entire country by, Hollywood or, the different things that they read, but, there's opportunities in a lot of places.
Correct. And, typically I give a lot of talks at schools and English schools and things like that over the years. And, I started going, okay, all right, some tough love. Your country is like here on the national GDP, global GDP list. There's only like 20 countries in front of you, and there's 170 countries behind you, under you. So I don't want to hear any of this like Germans make more than we do anymore. Like I'm over it, guys. Like what kind of attitude if that's always your go-to, then that's going to be your go-to for your whole life,
Yeah.
is looking at what you don't have and how someone else has something better than you do, instead of
Crazy
going,
what being a victim can make, change perspectives in such a negative way, It's crazy. Now, Jake, we're running kind of running out of time here, but if somebody wanted to get in touch with you for marketing, how would they get a hold of you? I mean, you're all the way in Thailand, so what's the best way to reach you if you wanted to do like I did and hire you
yeah,
while living in the States?
yeah, our website, which I can put on the screen when we edit this later,
Perfect.
and LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. Or reach out to Brian and go, hey, who's that Jake guy? Yeah, we are trying to build a team that can help, especially companies in industries that typically don't get a lot of love from marketing agencies and things like that. So working in a sawmill company for 8 years, or some of the other companies that we've worked for in some of these, like the wood industry or the oil and gas or manufacturing, etc., shows us that there's a lot of opportunity and needs in a lot of these companies. But when they go to an agency, the agency is typically set up for kind of mass market marketing.
One size fits all type deal. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are definitely customized. Any agency will try to customize themselves to your niche and things like that. But if we kind of make that our thing, right? We're already kind of pre-customized. We don't do what everybody else does and kind of mass market stuff. We're already working for companies that need a very unique approach or combination of some of these marketing tactics and strategies. So that's kind of the direction that we'd like to go. But we'll see. We'll see. That's theoretical at this point.
For more info, you'll have the website there, and if that doesn't work, they can contact me, and I'll send them your direction.
100%. Thank you
Well,
very
cool.
much for having me on, Brian. It was always a really nice time to chat, and I'm sure we went off script a few places.
That's all right, man. Those are the best ones. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate you being on. Great, interesting story, man. From all over the world, ended up in Thailand, and we'll have to do it again to catch up with all the different ministries and things that you're doing in Thailand. So, but I do want to say thank you for listening to Alger Podcast, and again, you can get more information and other podcasts on my website, which is algercoaching.com. That's ALGER, algercoaching.com. Thank you.